continents of Zeranbin.
How's he not 39? Yep. Forty. 40. 40. 40. 40. Sorry, my fault. My bad.
Okay, so the synopsis. We hear about two colors of the face of Zerampin, red and white. When sins multiply on earth, the face illuminates in red, and judgments prevail. When people are righteous, then the white shines from Atika Kadisha, and everything is illuminated with mercy. We hear that all the angels assume the colors that this face assumes. We learn that the two apples of the face of Zerampin are like two spice offerings, which emit good fragrance. The secret of the illumination of Hokmah from below upwards, called fragrance, and the secret meaning of a man's wisdom makes his face to shine, Kohelet 8:1, is evidence of what I said about Abba and Ima, for the whole testimony of reading the face depends on it, on the face. Yet evidence depends on the whole facial expression, that is, on the forehead and the nose, as has been said, that one testifies he saw a person's face only with the nose. But the two spice offerings, which are white and red, testify about Abba and Ima. They testify about the inheritance he receives from Abba and Ima, and about his holding on to them. In our Baraisa, we explained the many differences between white and red, yet nevertheless, they are included in Zerampin together, on the white side, that is, under the power of the whites. When the face of Zerampin shines in white, that is, Chesed from Atika, or Chokmah, the white in it covers red in the secret of Hokmah, and everything is illuminated. Then it is written, Hashem makes his face to shine upon you. When wicked people multiply and judgments are suspended over the world, there is shutting off everywhere, that is, all lights are shut and do not shine. And then red expands throughout the face, which is judgment, and covers that white, which is mercy, and then everything is in a state of judgment. Then it is written, the face of Hashem is against those who do evil. Everything depends on it, hence that face indicates everything. There are many angels with shields waiting for those facial colors, white and red, expecting those colors. When the colors shine, all the worlds are joyful. When the white shines, everything assumes the color. And when the red appears, everything assumes that color, which is judgment. And so, Zerampin has various facial expressions. I can show one of the facial expressions. This tikkun that I'm about to share is a tikkun that Malachi compiled from a tikkun that is on one of the elons that I have. So here we go, I'll send it in. So you can see that there's two variations. You can see there's one where he's smiling and one where he's frowning. The one that he's smiling is on the right side, and the one that he's frowning is on the left side. And these two depend on whether or not it's connected to Yisod. When it's connected to Yisod, it creates a smile. That's how code Yisod creates a smile. But when Yisod is damaged, it creates a frown. And so the face and the continents of Zerampin alters on whether or not one retains its righteousness or enters into unholiness. Now, to understand tonight's passage, we have to see that the whiteness comes from the supernal Chokmah above. This is what's written, lift up your eyes and see who created these. Lift up your eyes, meaning the seven eyes of Zerampin, looking upwards to the supernal Atik. And from that place, it's then written, washed with milk. That milk is the supernal whiteness that descends from Chokmah, the supernal light of the endless. If that light is able to shine, then it's written, wisdom makes one's face to shine. This is also the same sod behind what you've learned regarding the Atik, for the face of Zerampin is only after the image of the Atik. And it was explained to you all in Likute that the hard spark is the face of the king, the skull of the king, and that light passed through it from wisdom. An example from the Simsum, from which it is written, wisdom makes one's face to shine. And so the light that poured in through the restriction, which was the Hokmah of the Atik, illuminated the 7 sockets where the kings emerged. That is the light of the eyes, the light of the ears, the light of the nose, the light of the mouth, etc. So it said, wisdom makes one's face to shine. Just as it occurs above in the Atik, as it's explained in Likute, it also occurs below in Zeranpin. There are many other parables to allude to this idea. Zeranpin is also called the menorah, from which the menorah must be filled with oil from Hokmah and fire from Bina, and must not allow to become extinguished, because the extinguishing of the lights of Zeranpin causes the continence of the face to no longer illuminate. When the continence of the face no longer illuminates with the supernal whiteness, then the lights are cut off, and it becomes red. The entire nature changes drastically. And when the red takes over, red is the secret of Edom. Edom means red. And this redness are because of its roots in the kings of Edom. And this is the quality that he takes out upon the wicked that lean to the left. And this is when one is caught in below. And this is why it's written, why sleep you, Hashem, and wake up and lay waste to your enemies, and lift up your eyes and see who created these. And other such verses which talk about the shift of continence. It grieved him at his heart. He relented of his evil, etc. Because Zeranpin is a very unique Partsuf. Everything is essentially revolving around it, because everything is rooted through it in one way or another. From top down, it acts as a screen. And from bottom up, it acts as a lower king and a judge. It was explained to you how these are the roots of our midot, that all of the forms of the midot are rooted in this Partsuf, and how this Partsuf kindled a fire amidst them. That is to say, that our actions incur interactions with this Partsuf of Zeranpin. So what we have to be careful in understanding the nature of this particular passage is to understand very clearly that these angels can either be white or they can be red. And this is also the sod of this matter, that though your garments be red, like scarlet, they'll be white as snow. Though your garments be red, they'll be white. This, in one level, hints to us, meaning that even though we exist in the flesh, we become like the light. But at a much higher sod level, it refers to the nature of Zeranpin. Though his nature be red, because Zeranpin is called a garment. The Zohar says, I'm without a son, I'm naked. For Zeranpin is a garment, a screen, a clothing, a malbush for the upper lights. Therefore, though the garment be red, meaning Zeranpin, it will become white, meaning when it's illuminated and washed with milk by the lifting of those supernal eyes, from which it said, the eyes of Hashem rove to and fro. It also says of the Satan that they rove to and fro, because when those eyes open of Zeranpin, when the Atika Kadisha is not revealed in the world, but everything is only dependent on Zeranpin, it says the world is disquieted for a child who sits on the throne. This refers to Zeranpin, who is called a child. And when he sits on the throne, meaning that he becomes the ruler, then the earth is disquieted. And also for a handmaiden that sits in the place of her mistress. So when the wicked evildoers and people that do not take the time to illuminate the Atik, or to withdraw down the light of the Atik, to become a vessel for the Atik, then Zeranpin becomes the ruling factor. He takes position of the throne, and he acts sometimes with mercy, sometimes with love, and sometimes with extreme wrath, because his natures are always changing. But the Atik is always supernal mercy. For example, Aleph separates him from Shin. When you come to the light of Aleph separates him from Shin, you come into the light of tree on top of tree, you come into the light of any of these types of concepts. The center column becoming yellow, every female producing red, every male producing white. When you come into these levels, that's only mercy. No evil comes from that light, meaning that should you come to that light, only goodness, only mercy, no evil. But when you come into the light of Zeranpin, meaning the forms, midot, the internal workings of the chariot, there's an admixture of good and evil. And it's very important that we stay away from kindling the fire of Hashem in our midst, that we ensure that our forms are always looking up to draw down so that Zeranpin should see what is above it, meaning to be illuminated so that his eyes should become white, washed with milk, and not in this state of wrathful judgment. Because we see it, then what happens following is that it is written, Hashem is a man of war. And so many wars have been fought over ideas, religion, man-made things. And the continence behind it was that Hashem's anger was kindled in their midst. That is to say that all of the forms of millions of people were kindled by the root of that Partsuf, which is called king of the lower domain, the lower king, which is this place. And so it's important that the light come in to cause, as a collective. This is also one of the important reasons as to why it's not sufficient enough for a person to become illuminated for themselves. Because in reality, every person is but a scale of that giant serpent. And until we realize that it doesn't change until there's a collective shift, not a singular shift. Individual attainment is prerequisites to show up to the job site. If you don't have attainment, then you're not qualified to even perform the great work. For example, it would be like a person who has no construction experience showing up to a construction site. They would just get in the way, meaning that one would first learn the craft, the art, before doing anything else. And in the same likeness, how could you help anyone else if you can't help yourself? And if you have not healed yourself, how could you heal anyone else? Very similar likeness. And the main reason why I'm pointing this out is because the way and the nature of Zeranpin is a collective Partsuf. Even though each person has an individual aspect of Zeranpin, we call it midot or forms, as stated before, it's just a scale of a giant Tana. So with that being said, the collective shift must occur, and that's what brings about the age. And so all of the language that describes the progression of the ages into the Messianic redemption are really just alluding to this idea of rectifications. And these rectifications are really happening for the redemption of the firstborn son, redeeming so that Hashem should be one. And it says on that day, he and his name will be one. And what day is that? They say the day of redemption. Because this hinting to the idea that Zeranpin, as it stands right now, is disconnected. That the collective Zeranpin, not the individual Zeranpin, the scale, I'm talking about the collective, is disconnected from both above and below. And it must be redeemed as a collective, of which it is written to redeem the firstborn. And so all of the Gilgul occurs because we have to become the tikkun of his correction, meaning that we have to correct Zeranpin itself. We have to redeem the firstborn. And every single person's tikkun is a repairing to its root in that Partsuf. And every single person is a piece of that. This is why there are 70 nations, because the 70 nations are billions of sparks that are a part of this Partsuf. And it comes to include Israel. So when all of these different nations, which are all different parts of this Partsuf, are all different sparks that need rectification in order to rectify that Partsuf in particular. And redemption occurs when the collective correction has occurred. And then Hashem and his name, meaning Zeranpin, can finally become one with the higher and lower realities. because as it is right now, he is still not merged with the higher and lower reality. Even though certain pieces of his sparks have performed certain corrections and he's in the process of being corrected, all of his sparks still need to finish the correction in order for redemption to be at hand for a global scale. So that's the task that we find at hand, and that is where direction everything is going through. And luckily, the Melech HaMavet, the angel of death, assists us greatly, forcing that, and any sparks that become too corrupted, they die and they reincarnate. And this is all hinted at where it said that the sages were stored in the light of the moon until the fullness. That is to say, the sages were at the root when you've corrected your portion of the root in this supernal parzuf, in the Adam Gedal, if you like Adam Katan. When the roots are corrected, then you return to your root. Thus it was said of Job, where were you when I laid the foundations? Where were you? Meaning, what part of the body were you? Where is your spark from? And did you repair the root which you are connected to? And if you have repaired the root to where you're connected to, then when you die, you'll be stored away in that root that's been corrected until the rest of the correction occurs, by which time the period of impurity is completed, from which it was said 7 days. And then there will be oneness. Some say this refers to the 7,000 years. And then Hashem will stand, because as of right now, he's called a cripple. These are very deep, deep, deep matters that are beyond the scope of this conversation. But nonetheless, these are the facts. So with that being said, tonight's portion is very straightforward. As David HaMelech said, open my eyes and behold the wonders of your Torah. Consider very carefully about how this collective midot of existence is the king of this place, and how all of us are parts of this collective midot, which encompasses everything. And thus seeing why the sages said you must live as if the world depends on you, because every person's tikkun is necessary for the overall tikkun, because you cannot tikkun that root, because every person is a unique root. You can only tikkun your own root, but you can assist someone else who's rooted somewhere else in the parzuf to perform a tikkun, in which will allow that root to be tikkuned. But you can't tikkun anything outside of your own root. But you can assist others to tikkun their roots, and in doing so, collectively, we will tikkun everything. And you will become healed, and not like a... You all, Laila Tov, Shalom, Salah.
TORAH.